We got the matchups. Which matchup in this week? This is a bad Browns team, but is there something that should worry the Eagles fans out there? We're going to get into that. We're live at Chickies and Pete's here at the Tropicana in Atlantic City. Chickies and Pete's and A.J. Brown are teaming up with a new wing flavor for the football season. And, of course, you can get that right here, right now, at the Tropicana in Atlantic City. A.J. Brown's Sweet Heat Wings, an irresistible blend of sweet and spicy, reflect his time and roots at Ole Miss and his fiery competitive spirit. And, Andrew, I think we can all agree this offense has missed his fiery and competitive spirit, but it looks like old number 11 will be back this week. Is that the vibe you're getting?
Yep, I would say that he's going to be back this week, and all signs are pointing to that. It's trending in that direction, and the Eagles, frankly, they really need him. You said it best. He's a dominant player. Anytime you're without one of the top receivers in football, your offense is naturally going to look a little bit different. But he adds such a new dimension to the offense that we really haven't seen, because remember, he only played in week one, so you don't necessarily know what the offense is going to look like. With A.J. Brown inserted in it, I think you're going to see it look a lot different, and it's going to open things up for a lot of different players. He's such a dominant player that I think sometimes his absence may even be taken for granted.
Yeah, and Nick Sirianni was asked yesterday about how they had to kind of tweak their offense without Brown. You're kind of, you hinted at it right there. We're judging Kellen Moore on an offense that really he didn't sign up for, right? I mean, so now I think you could start looking at Moore and say, all right, this is what you struggled with without him. What is this team going to look like with Brown and with A.J. Smith-Beck? We really have only seen about 3 quarters of what that will look like, maybe, a game against Green Bay. So it should be interesting to see what that offense, but this is an interesting defense they're going to face. Our old friend, Andrew, Jim Schwartz, he's turned into a blitzer. He didn't blitz here in Philly, but he's blitzing almost, 39% of the time. Is this defense a concern? They were really good last year. Is this the same level of defense from Cleveland that they were a year ago that took them to the playoffs?
Well, their offense is abysmal, but their defense is something that they can hang their hat on. It's interesting to see Jim Schwartz adopt that sort of a personality, but I think it's philosophical, right? I think that's what you're naturally going to see with the Browns organization, whereas here it's more of a passive. You already know what the philosophical approach is going to be defensively. So I think with Jim Schwartz, you're going to see him get creative in how he uses Myles Garrett. I think you're going to see Jeremiah Koromoa. He's a very athletic second-level player who they might find ways to blitz him up the middle, but their secondary is very good. They have 3 players at corner that can all take certain players away, starting with Denzel Ward, who's probably going to draw A.J. Brown in coverage for the majority of the afternoon. Martin Emerson's a player I really like coming out of the draft. He's on the opposite side. And then at nickel is Greg Newsome from Northwestern, who has been a nice story. I liked him coming out of the draft a few years ago. Grant Delpit at safety is another player that Jalen Hurts is going to have to be mindful of, especially when he's looking over the middle of the field. His interceptions have come to Xavier McKinney and Jesse Bates. So those are, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's an interesting defense. As you mentioned, their offense has been abysmal, but their defense is pretty solid. Now, that was really the strength of that team. You mentioned Myles Garrett. Getting Lane Johnson back, that should help with that situation. But how do you view the Eagles' offense so far against the blitz? If this is what Jim Schwartz is going to do and send a lot of pressure, is that a positive for Philly's offense?
I think the Eagles, by and large, have done a decent job of blocking it up. I think Jalen's had some good answers. Now, he does hold on to the ball a tick longer than you'd like, and I think that's something they're going to end up coaching out of him, Kellen Moore and quarterbacks coach Doug Nussmeier. But getting Lane Johnson back obviously alleviates a lot more concern than you would ordinarily have going against a Browns team that's very attack style, and they're going to get after it. So I think that what I've seen from Jalen Hurts is him taking that next step in terms of being able to sense where pressure's coming from. Now, sensing where pressure's coming from and being able to protect the football and have a sense of spatial awareness where bodies are is a totally different thing. He has to be better at that. I'm not absolving him of that, but I think that he has, by all accounts, shown improvement in being able to kind of handle and navigate pressure.
I'm interested to get your take. Saquon Barkley's usage has been up this year from, what the Eagles running backs generally have. That's a good thing, I guess, if you're someone who is, looking forward to Barkley. But in a game like this week, is Barkley, kind of a decoy player or another game where he's another big usage, big weapon?
No, I think your objective going into every week has to be getting the football to your best players, and Saquon Barkley is one of the Eagles' best players. He's going to be a prominent piece to every offensive game plan, regardless of whatever run defense you're going against or how teams try to combat that. He's going to be a factor either in the passing game or trying to get some momentum going downhill. This is a game where when you're coming off the bye week, things didn't go your way against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What you'd like to see from the Eagles is trying to get Jaylen Hunt and the offense into some sort of a rhythm. And the way to do that to me is always short completions over the middle to your tight end, your safety blanket in Dallas Goedert, and runs up the middle with Saquon Barkley to kind of see where the defense is, see how they're playing him, maybe wear them down a little bit, and sort of impose your will and get some of those big offensive linemen like Mekhi Becton leaning on some of those players. And it probably, in a lot of cases, it does take its toll by the third and fourth quarter.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. You wrote about over at InsideTheBirds.com the release of Devin White. You also wrote about Jeremiah Trotter, Ben Van Sumeren. So give me kind of through your eyes where this linebacking situation sits now, and if you could give a quick little reasoning and thoughts on White and why he's no longer here and why it didn't work out.
Okay, a few questions in there, but I would say that Devin White is a player that, yes, he got all the first-team reps in training camp except the joint practice that I was at in Foxborough. That was Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. But I just think with Devin White, sometimes getting all those reps can work against you because you're able to reveal, maybe some shortcomings that you have, or maybe you're able to confirm maybe what Vic Fangio maybe feared. You never know. But I think that obviously the second half of training camp, it was clear, it was very evident to me and everyone who was there that Nakobe Dean was the better player and going to probably overtake him at the Mike linebacker spot. But I don't know that any of us thought that that Devin White would be relegated to inactive. I think that it was more so viewed that Devin White and Nakobe would be the starters, or that Devin White might be supplemented in. But it was very clear that he wasn't playing as fast as Nakobe. He wasn't seeing things he wasn't seeing things the same way as Zach Bond or Nakobe. It was a little bit slow with his eyes, and those are all things that plagued him with Tampa Bay. And I think as the summer wore on, it became very evident because there's a lot of demands placed on the shoulders of the linebacker position in Vic Fangio's defense. And for a player like Devin White, who is immensely athletic, but sometimes playing within structure had been his detriment, and I think that kind of revealed itself. And he doesn't play special teams, so that's where guys like Oren Burks and Ben Van Sumeren and Jeremiah Trotter as well, that's where they factor into the game day equation. And if Devin White wasn't starting for you and he's not playing special teams, that's kind of expensive insurance. And
right.
You signed a one-year deal, so you kind of you owe it to the player. And I think for Devin White, you have to kind of you meet in the middle and you figure out a way to rectify the situation. And for Devin White, it was to no longer be here. So.
Yeah, and then, of course, as you wrote about Trotter and Ben Van Sumeren, are those guys, are they happy with Dean and Bond? Are they comfortable? You know what I'm saying? Like that linebacking situation now, White seemingly was still around in case somebody got hurt. It felt like he was going to be, you said he doesn't play special teams, but if somebody got hurt, you might now become the guy. It seems now that they're comfortable enough with Trotter and Van Sumeren that they had passed White. Is that your read of things?
Yeah, if for Devin White, like if your coordinator maybe doesn't trust you to execute the scheme in his vision, or if there's some sort of apprehension about putting you out there, wondering whether or not you're going to, allow a big play in your direction, I think that there's always so much that you can do for a player like that. And I think ultimately it would have been Jeremiah Trotter Jr., by the way, got 3 snaps against the Buccaneers, which is more than Devin White got for the Eagles. So I think that kind of tells you where the pecking order was, what the Eagles' thought process is. They really like Trotter Jr. They really like Ben Van Sumeren. Oren Burks is still there. It's a player that they found a way to get him on the 53-man roster when they went heavy at 6 inside linebackers. So they obviously like what he brings from a veteran and experience standpoint and special teams. So I think they're really happy with their depth. Nick Sirianni spoke about that he's happy with the room. The depth is really showing, and they're really improving on their fundamentals, including block deconstruction, which has been a point of emphasis from linebackers coach Bobby King. So I think as a whole, that whole room, they all bring something unique and different to the table, and the young players are progressing, in a way that gives the Eagles some comfort level in moving forward.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Cooper DeJean, there's some feeling that he might be the new slot guy. What does he bring that's different from what Maddox has brought to this team in that slot? Do you think that will be an upgrade if they make that change?
Well, I think he's more reactive. His instincts. He's a little bit more of a twitchy player at this stage, and that's I think when you look at Vontae Maddox, it's really not fair to kind of look at him as a player who just simply doesn't have it, because at one point he was one of the premier players at his position, and injuries may have taken its toll. Whatever the case may be, I think you're seeing that he's just a tick slow in coverage. He missed an open field tackle. He just doesn't look to be the same player that he was. And, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And putting him back out there, knowing that teams are going to look at and try to exploit him on the back end, I think you eventually have to get the startup costs out of the way with Cooper DeJean earlier than later, knowing that you're going to have to rely on him down the stretch. He's just a lot more athletic. His tackling prowess is better. And just understand, everybody clamors for young players, play this guy, play him. But they don't take into account that there are going to be growing pains. And at the first sign of growing pains, a lot of times you see a lot of folks get frustrated. Just understand that this is part of the process. Whenever you're trying to, when I talk about startup costs, these are things that have to be taken into account. So just be mindful of that and allow players to kind of learn on the job and grow through it.
Andrew, when you were watching Cooper and getting ready for your draft coverage, do you feel that the slot is his best position?
I viewed him as a safety primarily, but a slot nickel or a slot nickel safety hybrid type of player is somebody that is something that I could see suiting him best long term. I didn't view him as a perimeter player at the corner position, but that's how the Eagles viewed him initially. So I think that they view him as a versatile back end player, but I think his best fit ultimately will be at safety/nickel. And this is a player who, he didn't have those 3 weeks of training camp. So it's easy to say, in the preseason game, he played in the preseason finale. There were times where it looked like maybe teams were testing him in coverage and he didn't look the best. Well, that's to be expected. You have to knock off the rust. And he's a player that the Eagles have high hopes for, big plans for. And I think you're going to see him, whether or not he starts, well, that remains to be seen. But I would expect him to at least supplement at that nickel position on Sunday with Vontae Maddox.
They opened the window on Sidney Brown. Do you have any anticipation or expectation that he can help this defense improve? I mean, obviously you got Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson in that role. Does he take playing time away from them? Is he just a reserve? Is there another way that you see that they could use him?
Yeah, it's way too early to make that determination right now, week 6. He's moving well. He's looked well working on the side field when we've observed him in training camp. But to expect a player who hasn't gotten any live reps prior to Wednesday, that was his first day, in Vic Fangio's system, I mean, there is going to be some sort of a crash course that takes place here, but I don't know that it's fair to expect Sidney Brown to be able to jump in there immediately and overtake CJ or Reed or eat into their snaps in any significant way initially. I think eventually Vic Fangio is going to see that Sidney Brown brings a lot of energy and physicality and can create a spark on the back end. And you want to get players like that involved. He's also very effective coming downhill and attacking the running game. So those are players that you want on defense, and especially in that type of role, you could probably plug him in and get him some snaps in that area. But I think for him to be expected to be a prominent fixture, it's going to take a little bit of time. But I would expect him to be a contributor in some capacity on Sunday.
I know we're talking about a lot of young players. We're 6 weeks in. You see where these rookies are. In your mind, has Jaylen Hunt helped this team at all this year? Or is that too much of a project? I'm asking only because it's an area where obviously they have an obvious need at pass rush.
Yeah, I think he can help. I think he can. I mean, he played 5 snaps in week 4, which is more than anyone expected him to play. Remember, he was a lot of folks had him chalked up as a redshirt rookie, which certainly is not the case. I think as he continues to build his strength and develop a pass rush plan and just get stronger physically, I think ultimately you're going to see him eat into some of these snaps as a pass rusher. And look, is he going to? Again, you have to temper your expectations. A lot of folks want to see him out there because he has some juice, and you're not happy with Bryce Huff or what have you. But going against premier offensive tackles, you're going to have to put that into perspective and realize that he's going to give you some good reps, but there's also some that he might not win and you might not hear from him. But I think that, again, just like with Cooper DeJean, you have to get the startup costs out of the way and start to work him into the rotation. And I believe that they will, but not in any significant way, at least, as we sit here week 6.
Okay, you're getting your 2 receivers back. You're getting your offensive lineman back. You look like a team coming out of the bye. If there's a matchup in this game, you look at, they're the biggest favorite of the week, by the way, Andrew. They're almost a double-digit favorite against Cleveland. There's something about Cleveland that concerns you. Where's that?
I would say the back end, Mike. I think the back end has a good, interesting blend of veteran savvy and players who can take the football away. And if you're Jalen Hurts and who has been turnover prone through the first 4 weeks, I would expect them to try and do whatever they can to manipulate him with the eyes and be deceptive in their coverage. But that to me, other than that, if he's able to kind of keep the ball out of harm's way, and if they get things wrong with Saquon Barkley early on, or the indefensible slant pattern to A.J. Brown, which, you get him the ball and allow him to kind of break tackles and do the rest, I think the Eagles are going to be just fine.
All right, it's all right here on 97.3 ESPN. This Sunday, the pregame coverage starts at noon, the kickoff at 1. He's Andrew DiCecco, and, of course, it's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, we'll check in with you next week, pal.
Sounds good. Thanks.